This is real gunfire captured on a body-worn camera. In the video, an officer is desperately running toward his patrol car, trying to escape the scene. This area was a trap carefully designed by the suspects to target police. They had turned their property into a war bunker, attempting to eliminate any officer who came their way. Today we're covering one of the most deadly attacks on police in modern Australian history, and the country's first terrorist attack driven by a combination of extreme religious beliefs and conspiracy theories. So what exactly happened? Let's travel back to 2022 and step into this bloody and bizarre story. Queensland is located in northeastern Australia with abundant sunshine and a pleasant climate. It is known as the Sunshine State. It is home to one of the world's 7 natural wonders, the Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef system on the planet. Its spectacular underwater scenery attracts hundreds of thousands of tourists every year, and our story today takes place on this beautiful land. In December 2022, Queensland police received a request from neighboring New South Wales to assist in a missing persons case. The missing person was Nathaniel, a 46-year-old man. He had once been known in education circles as the problem school, a fixer for failing schools. Back in 2013, while teaching at a remote elementary school in Queensland, he made a name for himself with his iron-fisted management style and a self-created singing-teaching method. Later, during his tenure at the Jocks Knob State School, he continued his educational reforms and even raised tuition money for underprivileged students, earning him the title of Education Pioneer from local media. In 2020, Nathaniel was urgently reassigned to take over a notoriously troubled school in New South Wales, Gareth Community College, which was known as the worst public school in the state. In 21 years, it had gone through 21 principals, had severe teacher shortages, and was plagued by campus violence, widely considered a lost cause. Nathaniel arrived with swift, decisive action, like a savior, reforming school rules, rebuilding management systems, and restoring relationships between teachers and students. Under his efforts, the school's culture began to turn around. But just as things were starting to improve, fate slammed the brakes. In August 2021, he suffered a heart attack. On top of that, he strongly opposed the school's mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy, believing the vaccine was a government conspiracy. So he left campus and went home to recover. During his leave, he wrote multiple letters to the Department of Education, raising issues such as unfair distribution of educational resources, but all his complaints disappeared into a black hole, receiving no response because he wasn't working and refused to get vaccinated. The Department of Education eventually terminated his employment. He then vanished from public view, his whereabouts unknown. Police investigation revealed that in December of that same year, during the lockdown, he had secretly crossed the border from New South Wales into Queensland, attempting to seek refuge with his brother Gareth. Unfortunately, his journey didn't go smoothly. His Toyota off-road vehicle, worth over $100,000, got stuck in floodwaters and was completely disabled. Fortunately, a kind stranger helped him and he was rescued. But after that, he disappeared entirely. No calls, no text replies, not even his children or wife could reach him. All he left behind was his vehicle, 3 guns, and a large amount of ammunition. It wasn't until the 4th of December 2022 that his estranged wife finally filed a police report saying her husband hadn't been seen in a year. She was worried that he might have died of a heart attack. At the same time, she also provided police with a threatening email from her husband's brother, Gareth. The email was full of abusive, obscene language, and also mentioned Nathaniel's disappearance. This caught police's attention and an investigation was launched, and they quickly made a significant discovery. Nathaniel grew up in an ultra-conservative Christian family. His father, Ronald, was a stubborn pastor whose views were so conservative they bordered on extreme. He opposed women holding public office, believed marriage was a sacred arrangement ordained by God, and loathed any behavior that deviated from tradition. But even under the same God-first environment, the two brothers went down completely different paths. The older brother Gareth was paranoid from a young age and liked to tinker with firearms. As an adult, he became obsessed with hunting and often tortured animals, growing increasingly brutal. During his adolescence, he once tried to convince his girlfriend to sign a suicide pact. Fortunately, it didn't work, and from then on, People treated him like a freak, often calling him crazy behind his back. His employment history was just as chaotic. He worked as a security guard, a janitor, a street vendor, and even briefly as a teacher, but was quickly fired because of poor reviews for physically punishing students. By contrast, Nathaniel's life was far more polished. His career went smoothly. In 1995, he married Stacey, whom he met at church. The couple was happy and had a son and a daughter. Both were teachers, and their 2 children were lovely. They were seen as the model family. But unfortunately, as time went on, their relationship hit trouble, and the conflicts grew. Eventually, they divorced and both remarried. To everyone's shock, Stacey's new husband turned out to be Nathaniel's older brother Gareth. His ex-wife had become his sister-in-law. This shocking turn of events infuriated their conservative father, Ronald. Add to that the fact that both sons had publicly accused him of childhood abuse, and Ronald was absolutely furious. He disowned both sons, shouting, "This is an insult to God." For years after, father and sons never spoke again. Strangely, this awkward remarriage didn't hurt the brothers' relationship. On the contrary, it made them even closer. For a time, rumors circulated that Stacey and the 2 brothers were involved in a threesome relationship. Whether that was true, outsiders couldn't say. In 2015, Gareth and his wife purchased the 251 Wieambilla property, about 300 kilometers northwest of Brisbane. The area was extremely remote. In 2021, Wieambilla had fewer than 100 residents. They lived there, isolated and self-sufficient. Police also uncovered some disturbing behavior. Gareth often hunted wild boar with his dogs, and would deliberately leave the bloody carcasses near school playgrounds to frighten children. He was extremely violent and frequently abused his wife, punching, kicking, pulling hair, slapping her face. But strangely, Stacey never left him. Gareth had installed cameras and barbed wire around the farm and was intensely paranoid. Stacey, meanwhile, while working as a teacher, turned a blind eye to campus bullying and even punished children who tried to report it. Taken together, it was clear that Gareth and Stacey were extremely dangerous, considering that Nathaniel had gone to them before his disappearance and then completely vanished. Police were fairly certain the couple was involved. Their farm had to be thoroughly investigated. On the 12th of December 2022, Christmas was approaching, and a festive atmosphere filled the air. Everything seemed calm and peaceful, but the fierce gun battle that erupted that day would be written into Australian police history. 2 nearby police stations each sent 2 officers to the 251 Wieambilla property to investigate the missing persons case. They were Matthew, 26, Rachel, 29, and Randall and Keely, both 28. Matthew was tall, physically fit, and the steady anchor of the team. Rachel was sunny, cheerful, and the team's joker. Randall and Keely were recent partners, new recruits full of passion and idealism. They all believed it was just a routine investigation. On the way, Matthew joked about eating turkey after the case, and Rachel was thinking about buying a Christmas gift for her dog. None of them could have imagined they were walking into a defensive bunker that had been prepared for nearly 5 years. At 4:35 p.m., the 2 patrol cars arrived at the destination. It was a private property spanning 645 acres. The trees were thick, and the area was eerily quiet. The farmhouse was surrounded by low metal fences and wooden barricades, with many deliberately created blind spots. A sign on the gate read, "Private property, no trespassing." But since they were there to investigate, after honking repeatedly with no response, they climbed over the fence and headed toward the house deeper inside. The 4 officers didn't think much of it, chatting and introducing themselves as they walked. But less than 2 minutes in, a gunshot rang out without warning. Matthew's chest exploded with blood. He staggered a few steps, then collapsed, motionless. The other 3 froze in shock. Randall reacted first, shouting, "Fall back! Fall back!" At that moment, a barrage of gunfire erupted. Randall dove behind a tree for cover, while Keely rolled into the roadside brush, lying flat on the ground, too afraid to lift his head. Rachel wasn't so lucky. As she turned, she was shot in the back. Despite the searing pain, she tried to reach for her police radio to call for help. But more shots rang out, hitting her leg, and she collapsed on the spot. From the first gunshot to 2 officers down, only about 10 seconds had passed. They hadn't even seen where the shooter was hiding. At 4:40 p.m., Rachel, gravely wounded, recorded a final message to her family through her body-worn camera, her voice weak. 2 minutes later, Gareth stepped out from a corner. Rachel looked up, trying to plead for mercy, but Gareth showed no emotion. He executed her with a shot to the head, then burst into laughter. Then another figure emerged, wearing camouflage. It was Nathaniel, the very person they had come to find. He and Gareth quickly took the sidearms from the 2 fallen officers and began searching for the remaining 2. Randall, hiding behind a tree, witnessed everything and immediately called headquarters to report. During this time, he saw the Gareth brothers slowly closing in on him. He faced a difficult choice: stay hidden or risk a run for it. As a rookie officer, he didn't have confidence he could take on 2 armed men. So taking a deep breath, he sprinted for his patrol car, drawing the brothers' attention, who opened fire wildly. Randall was only about 100 meters from the car, a sprint that would normally take just over 10 seconds. But in that moment, it felt like 10 kilometers. During the run, a bullet hit him in the hip. Perhaps due to adrenaline and fear, he didn't feel the pain, only a sense that he'd been hit. He didn't stop. He kept running, dove into the patrol car, slammed the gas pedal, and sped away. His body-worn camera captured everything. Seeing someone escape, the brothers were furious and set the remaining patrol car on fire. As flames roared into the sky, they began hunting for the last officer. Officer Keeley was terrified. Trembling, clutching his sidearm, he used the terrain to crawl into perfect concealment. Unable to find him, Gareth set the surrounding grass on fire, trying to smoke him out. At first, the fire was dozens of meters away, but minute by minute, it crept closer. Keeley still didn't dare move. He called headquarters, his voice shaking with raw fear. He was only 28, had joined the force recently, and had never been in combat. He never imagined his first real life, where death test would come so fast and so brutally. While Keeley was in hiding, nearby police had already received a distress call, but because the farm was so remote, they had to wait for reinforcements from farther away, which would take time. At this critical moment, another disaster unfolded. A nearby resident, Kelly, saw the thick smoke and heard gunfire, thinking it was a fire. She drove over to investigate and called police, but the dispatcher didn't know what was happening and only advised her not to get too close. Her husband, Alan, decided to go with another neighbor, Victor, to take a look. They took a shortcut. Alan was filming the burning car with his phone when, bang, he was shot and fell. Victor fled in panic and narrowly escaped. It wasn't until 6 p.m. that reinforcements finally arrived. Keeley, who had endured the agonizing wait, felt a wave of relief when he heard the sirens. He was ordered to retreat and safely extracted under heavy covering fire. Given the danger posed by the suspects, the Special Emergency Response Team arrived shortly after with heavy armored vehicles and 3 light armored vehicles. With the reinforcements, the tide turned. The Gareth brothers were now the hunted. Officers took up positions. 2 helicopters flew overhead, closely monitoring the house. Inside were 3 people, Gareth, Nathaniel, and their partner, Stacey. Each was armed and hiding behind pre-prepared cover. The moment the helicopters appeared, Gareth opened fire wildly, his breath lasting a full 15 minutes, completely irrational. At 7:31 p.m., they filmed a video inside and posted it online. Gareth said, "They came to kill us. We killed them. Police are devils. We are fighting a holy war." Officers tried to negotiate through a loudspeaker and repeatedly called their phones, but got no response. They refused all communication, responding only with gunfire to show their determination to fight to the end. Even when an armored vehicle approached, it was met with heavy fire. The 9.5-ton vehicle shook under the impact. Then Gareth fired at the second helicopter. Almost simultaneously, tactical officers returned fire, but could only hit their cover. The standoff continued. The fortified house was like a fortress, with layers of barricades preventing the armored vehicles from advancing. The 3 shooters, using crossfire and terrain advantages, repeatedly pushed back police advances. After hours of intense firefight, the tide finally turned. At 10:32 p.m., just as Gareth was reloading his magazine, a sniper seized the fleeting opportunity and struck him precisely in the head. 4 minutes later, Stacey, distracted by her husband's death, was also shot in the head and killed instantly. Even after losing 2 teammates, Nathaniel refused to surrender, hiding behind a log and continuing to fight. At 10:39 p.m., he was struck multiple times, in the head, left knee, and chest, and finally died. With the last gunshot fading, the night over Wieambilla fell silent. The bloody attack, which had started in the afternoon and stretched into the night, ended with all 3 assailants dead. After the smoke cleared, police were finally able to process the scene. In total, 6 people died in the attack: Gareth, Nathaniel, Stacey, officers Matthew and Rachel, and an innocent neighbor, Alan. To police's shock, around the burning armory, they discovered a small arsenal: 6 rifles, 2 service pistols taken from the fallen officers, large amounts of ammunition, a ghillie suit, a hunting bow, knives, and other cold weapons, USB drives, tactical communication equipment, and a huge stockpile of survival supplies. Scene investigation revealed that the house had been converted into a meticulously designed combat bunker. The walls were reinforced with bricks, the entrance welded with thick steel plates, and the perimeter surrounded by barbed wire. Mirror devices were placed along the roads to observe police movements. Multiple well-camouflaged sniper positions were set up around the property, equipped with seats and gun rests, offering wide fields of fire. When the officers were shot, the suspects were in a firing position that overlooked the farm entrance. In other words, the officers' every move was under their watch. All of this proved that the attack was not spontaneous. It was a premeditated, carefully orchestrated ambush. So the question remained, why did they ambush police? Gareth's extreme ideology and violent tendencies made his involvement unsurprising. But Nathaniel, seen by outsiders as a dedicated, gentle principal who had devoted his life to education, why would he join in? Just as police were puzzled, a key clue surfaced. Hours before the shootout, Nathaniel's wife had forwarded 4 emails to police, all containing Gareth's hostile, religiously charged rhetoric. Unfortunately, due to poor internal communication within Australian police, this critical warning never reached the frontline officers. The 4 officers had no knowledge of it. As the investigation deepened, police uncovered the roots of Gareth's extremism. He was a fervent conspiracy theorist, active in multiple dark web communities and extremist forums, promoting anti-government, anti-police, and anti-vaccine views. He was a firm believer in the sovereign citizen movement. He claimed that the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, which had shocked the nation, was not a tragic incident, but a false flag operation staged by the government to create panic, push gun control legislation, and disarm citizens. He also believed Princess Diana's death was a ritualistic murder, staged for some mysterious purpose. He had left such statements on forums. In short, Gareth had long descended into madness and paranoia, a textbook case of psychosis. In some religious traditions, there is a belief that before divine judgment, the world will face a great catastrophe, and the faithful will be granted rebirth. For Gareth, the COVID-19 pandemic was the signal he had been waiting for. The end times had arrived. He saw the vaccine as a tool of government control, a conspiracy, a demon of the apocalypse. Under Gareth's persistent influence, Nathaniel and Stacey also came to believe in this ideology. Forensic psychiatrists stated that Gareth suffered from classic persecutory delusions and was a primary psychotic. Nathaniel and Stacey, however, suffered from shared psychotic disorder. Their extreme beliefs and delusions were the result of Gareth's long-term influence. In other words, this tragedy was the eruption of a shared mental fog. Paranoid delusions, conspiracy theories, and apocalyptic religion twisting into a vortex of death that swallowed them, their innocent neighbor, and the young officers alike. This shocking attack was described by the media as one of the most deadly assaults on police in modern Australian history, and the country's first terrorist attack driven by a combination of extreme religious beliefs and conspiracy theories. After the incident, Australia flew flags at half-mast nationwide, and buildings in multiple cities lit up in blue and white to honor the fallen officers. On the 21st of December 2022, the government held a solemn memorial service. The 2 young officers were posthumously awarded numerous medals. Neighbor Alan was posthumously awarded the Queensland Police Valour Medal for his bravery and goodwill. On the day of the memorial, flowers piled up outside the crime scene, and police stations across the country. Nearby florists sold out, and citizens came to lay flowers and observe moments of silence in a deeply moving display of respect. At the press conference, Australia's Prime Minister spoke with deep emotion.
Today is a rough day indeed for all police officers and their families. Every officer knows the risk that they face in the line of duty. They are all too aware of the dangers that they face. Yet they do their job, they do it for our community. That is courage, and it is public service at the highest level. And today and every day I pay tribute to each and every one of the police officers who served their local communities and who served their nation.
The Queensland Police Commissioner also spoke tearfully. During the memorial, a controversial detail emerged. Alan's wife Kelly had called police twice on the afternoon of the attack, at 5:13 and 5:17 p.m. Although the dispatcher told her not to approach the fire, she was never told about the gunfire or that officers had already been shot. Kelly later said that if she had known an officer had been shot, she would have stopped her husband, but the dispatcher couldn't be blamed, as they didn't know what was happening at the farm either. The fact that the message hadn't been relayed more than half an hour after the shooting began revealed serious communication breakdowns within police. In fact, before the attack, Gareth had posted over 20 extremely extremist conspiracy theories and anti-government rants on social media, including provocations aimed at police, such as "Come get me if you can, I am ready." Stacey had also posted a handwritten letter claiming their children had abandoned their faith and that they had cut ties with them. Combined with their violent histories, their dangerousness was obvious. Police had actually noted these posts and flagged them as potential threats, but because Nathaniel was a well-known figure and the primary goal was locating him, combined with the internal communication failures, the frontline officers were led to believe it was just a routine welfare check, and they went in without any tactical awareness. In other words, Australian police bore some responsibility for this tragedy. Even more alarming, after the case was publicized, some conspiracy theory supporters tried to enter the crime scene to collect souvenirs and referred to the attackers as martyrs, to prevent the site from becoming a shrine for extremists. Queensland police bought the property and established a memorial to keep it from falling into extremist hands. In December 2023, an American man named Donald was arrested in Arizona on gun charges. He was a staunch believer in the premillennial Christian eschatology, convinced that Jesus would return before the millennium. Investigations showed that he had been in close contact with Gareth for years, exchanging large amounts of Christian apocalyptic messages, and had even commented on and praised the videos posted by Gareth on the day of the attack. Police believed Donald had a profound influence on Gareth, pushing him further into extremism. Gareth, in turn, influenced his brother Nathaniel and wife Stacey, ultimately leading the three to mutual destruction. This case demonstrates how extreme religious ideologies and conspiracy theories can infiltrate minds, growing silently in isolated individuals, an invisible but dangerous threat. That same month, Australia's National Cabinet held an emergency meeting where the Governor, General and State Premiers reached an agreement to push for a national firearms registration system, strengthen intelligence sharing, gun oversight, and extremist monitoring mechanisms. Although Australia's gun laws have always been strict, standards vary by state. This reform would be the most significant overhaul of the country's gun management system in nearly 30 years. Yet no system can entirely eliminate the dangers frontline police face. Gunfire can still come from unexpected dark corners. Those who wear the uniform and bravely walk into the darkness, paying with blood in their lives, protect our ordinary peaceful days. That is the story for today. Please give a like and subscribe. Your support means a lot to me